Hi, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's Pre-Shabbat AGJC Zoom call. Each week, we gather together the Jewish communities of all 6 GCC countries and our families and friends from around the world to hear an inspirational message before Shabbat, light candles, hear a Dvar Torah from Rabbi Abadi, pray, and read a section from the weekly Torah portion. Today, we will hear from Rabbi Alex Goldberg, Dean of Religious Life and Belief at the University of Surrey, who will speak about the English FA's Faith in Football program, a very timely discussion given that the recent World Cup took place in our region. The Association of Gulf Jewish Communities is the umbrella organization for the Jewish communities of the GCC countries that are building and enhancing Jewish life in the region. While each community is independent, we share a common goal and vision for Jewish life to flourish in the Gulf for the benefit of both residents and visitors. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you will join us next week as well. To stay updated on AGJC events, please follow us on Twitter at GulfJewish and visit our website, www.gulfjewish.org. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much, Shuda. And now we'll go to Shir, who's going to light the Shabbat candles this week.
I don't know how to cancel the blur. So I'm sorry, but it will be like that. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת.
Amen. Thank you so much. And now we'll head over to Yoel, who's going to lead us in Yedid Nefesh.
ידיד נפש, עבר רחמן, משוך עבדך אל רצונך, ירוץ עבדך כמו עין, ישתחווה אל מול הדרך, ירב לו ידידותיך, מנופץ ובכל טעם, הדוך נאה זיו העולם, נפשי חולת אבטח, אנא אל נרפה נעלה, בהכות לנועם, זיווה אז תתכבק ותתרפא והיא לשפחה עולם, ותקיימו רעמך וחוסנם בין אהובך, כי זה כמה נחוסף נכסף, לראות בתפארת וזב. אנא אלי מחק לבי, חושנה ותצלה, הגלנה ושרוף חביבי אלי, את חוקה שמועחת, תאי ארץ מקור נגליל, ונשמחה בך מהחביתי, במועד ונעלי, כי מעולם.
Thank you so much. And now over to Alex for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likat kala pnei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha Dodi likat kala pnei Shabbat nekavela. Shamo v'zacha b'dibur echad. איש ביאנו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם על תפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכוון אליך, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קום יצאי מתוך הפך רהב לך, שבט בימי קבחה ויהיו יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קום יצאי מתוך הפך רהב לך, שבט בימי קבחה ויהיו יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצלה, תוך אמוני ים סגולה. בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Thank you so much, Alex. And now over to Huda to introduce today's speaker.
Hi again. Today we are honored to hear from Rabbi Alex Goldberg, Dean of Religious Life and Belief at the University of Surrey, where he serves a community of 22,000 staff and students. He is the only rabbi within this role in Europe. Rabbi Alex works on several international and UK-based community relations and was asked by the United Nations to collaborate with them on developing an education program for faith leaders based on their Faithful Rights Toolkit in 2022. He was recently named as an honorary interfaith associate by the Lord Bishop of Guildford in recognition of his work in promoting interfaith religious relations between Jews, Christians, and other faith communities. He was the first Jew to become a King Abdullah Kaisid International Fellow and a Legacy Ariane de Rothschild Fellow. He chairs the English Football Association's Faith Network and was founding chair of Faith Forum for London and the mayor of London's Faith Conference. His work was recognized by the International Olympic Peace Truce Committee and London 2012 Organizing Committee. Like all of us here on Zoom, Rabbi Alex has a deep passion for building Jewish communities, and during the COVID lockdown, he created a new Jewish community in Guildford of 65 families. He contributes regularly to BBC Radio 2's Pause for Thought and appears regularly on television, radio, and print media. He's an advisor to the UK Religious Media Centre and has recently become a film producer. I have something common with Rabbi Alex. We both went to Carmel College, although he was there a few years later. Thank you, Rabbi Alex, for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I've been asked to speak today about the faith in football work, but to do so, I'm going to draw back a little bit to my time at the Commission for Racial Equality, because that's how I got into it. So the UK has a Race Relations Act, and it has an agency to police it. So if you're a public authority or even a commerce in the UK and you're accused of racism, you may be subject to criminal investigation. So, but we had a unit which was called the Safe Communities Initiative, which was trying to prevent all that. We went into areas where there were heightened community tensions, and there were where there had previously been either race riots or that looked like they might be race riots. So that they were the two options. And what we discovered when we wanted that people who are involved in race riots tend to not be over 80 and female. They tend to be 18 to 24 male. And there are two or three things that link that age group. The first thing is usually in that neighborhood, the love of sport. Second thing is the love of music, and sometimes the love of the environment. So we did a number of programs where we tried to bring what was called then parallel communities together. So in the north of England in the early 2000s, we had riots in Bradford and Oldham, where one group would identify as being Muslim and the other group would identify as being white. That was self-identification. What we discovered in all these communities, especially in the north, was that it was all around town planning. So in the 1960s, they had built high-rise blocks with a big road in the middle to get to the motorway, and they usually had social centres. So in one social centre, they would have would arise a area which was a social centre without alcohol and one with alcohol. The one without alcohol would become traditionally the Pakistan Cultural Association in many of the cities of the north. The population coming in the 50s and 60s was from Pakistan. And the other place would become, with a pub, a white working man's club. And eventually one would become a pub and one would become actually a mosque, but it would take 20, 30 years to come. So, and people want to live around their own sites, around their own social things. So you have Muslims one side of the road and white people of Christian heritage on the other side. And when they saw a pot of paint going across the road, they assumed the other community was getting their social housing redecorated. Or when they got a, or sometimes the other thing that was caused a major riot in the UK is an argument over boys over a woman. So if you've seen West Side Story, that's the basis of most race riots in the UK. What we decided to do was to try and bring them to neutral territory and neutral places, and it's football. So this is where the faith and football work came. We brought them first of all to Southampton and Arsenal, and we basically calmed them down and brought them in their favorite place, and we started getting discussions with them. In Southampton, we actually had discussions around faith and football and some of the issues in that town or that city, and we recommended to the Home Office to bulldoze a school and build 2 new schools. I don't have time, we've only got 10 minutes today to go into that. And what we realized that actually football has a great draw and attraction, and perhaps we could do more things. In the UK, we still have about 25–30% of our schools which are faith schools. So how do we bring faith schools together? Perhaps we could do it through football. And we agreed with the FA to set up the Faith and Football project. There are 3 examples. That's probably all I have time for today. One example where we started was at West Ham, and we managed to get their pitch to play on. To be able to play on a Premier League pitch is quite difficult in the UK. There's like 1 month you can do it and everybody wants it, but we were given the pitch. And originally in my first year, I remember I got a letter. I was accused of being sexist. Why was I accused of being sexist? Because it was an all-women's tournament. So I was accused of being sexist against boys. But we brought together 17 schools, and it was quite interesting. I said, let's mix the kids up for the day from the schools. The local authorities, the 4 local authorities in East London, wanted the schools to play each other. But I said, well, if we get a semi-final, which is Muslim or Muslim versus Jewish or Catholic versus Protestant, this is not the way to sort out our religious differences. Let's mix people up. It was quite astonishing. Each school, some were faith schools, some were what we call community foundation schools, which means they didn't have any faith, but they were usually of one ethnic group or one faith group. So we'd have a school where there were about 8 or 9 Irish Catholics coming in, with maybe 1 or 2 Nigerian Catholics joining them. We had a school with 8 Ashkenazi Jews with 2 Sephardi Jews, that sort of thing. In that area also schools which were 10 Bengali students, and often coming with a school from across the road with the same ethos with 10 white Christian kids. So we mixed them all up and we had a good day and we played with them. What we decided from there was that actually faith and football does have an attraction, but we should do it more in line with educational principles. So let's look at our religions, let's look at our identity, let's look at our citizenship. And we got Wembley to agree to lend us Wembley for 4 years. And we had Sikh schools, Jewish schools, Catholic schools, Muslim schools, Anglican Protestant schools, and Hindu and Sikh schools. And we had 4 a year, and they would actually meet each other regularly over the year. And what was really interesting about identity of young people would start, well, I'm from a Jewish school, I'm Jewish, and they would do Birkat Hamazon or whatever they would do if they're from the Jewish school, and Catholics would do grace and explain why they were doing that over their sandwiches. But what was really interesting was when they really got into their identities, because somebody might be Jewish and might be a fan of the Arsenal. Somebody might be Muslim and be a fan of the Arsenal too, or they could be a fan of Tottenham. And then we had this crossover of identities. And this proved important, and it's part of the citizenship curriculum here, of trying to get people to realize that they had a lot in common, as well as explain their differences. So that went on for 4 or 5 years. We have met young people that have been through that program now in their teens and early 20s, who said that some of them, it changed their lives. Some of them now do actually work in anti-racist work. Some now work in interfaith work. And we were surprised. We just wanted them to get to know each other and get to know the differences. I don't have much time left about this, but why does it work? If you have a parallel community, you need to be able to forge common projects. I think the late chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, Jonathan Sachs, said that it's all very well for theologians to discuss and have dialogue, interfaith dialogue face to face, but what really works is a concept called side by side. If you get two people together doing an activity, then they're more likely to start to bond. And where did he acknowledge this? He acknowledged this when the late King Hussein of Jordan and the late Shimon Peres were invited to the Duke of Northumberland's house. And the Duke of Northumberland got them to do the washing up. And apparently the accords between Israel and Jordan were more or less agreed over the washing up. I'm not sure if the Abraham Accords were agreed over washing up. Some people here may know, I don't know, but that's the theory. We've gone on to actually try and put faith center into clubs more recently, and I'll end on this. So if your stadium, the people in your stadium don't look like the people living around your stadium, doesn't make commercial sense. So within these stadiums, we've done Ramadan, and in the Jewish thing we like Sukkot. Sometimes people like Hanukkah to put a big Hanukkah up, but about 3 or 4 years ago, before the lockdown, we had sukkah in the stadium, and we put a sukkah in the middle of Wembley Stadium. Now in England, Wembley Stadium is iconic, and we believe it to be the home of football. So what better place to put a little home, a temporary home for the week, and invite the whole Jewish community into the stadium bit by bit. More recently, local clubs have taken that up. The idea of faith and football is to bring communities together. It takes generations to make change. And in conclusion, I will say this little story from the Gemara, which is about, it's a little story from the Gemara. A very famous miracle worker was walking down the road, and he came across an old man who was planting, his name was Honi, was the miracle worker, and he came across an old man who was planting a tree. And he said to the old man, what tree are you planting? He said, a carob tree. And the old man, and Honi goes, how long does it take for a carob tree to grow and bear fruit? And the old man said 70 years. I've looked this up on Wikipedia. Apparently it's 40 years now, but there we go. And Honi looked at him and said, what's the likelihood that you are going to be able to eat that fruit? He was quite old. He goes, well, I don't think it's very likely. And he goes, why do you do it? And he said, I do it because when I came into the world, my parents and my grandparents planted trees that I benefited from. And I want my children and grandchildren to eat from the fruit of these trees. I think planting trees together is what faith and football is all about.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. And, we've always said sports and culture can really bring communities together and people together. So what a lovely message to go into Shabbat. And now over to Rabbi Abadi for the Dvar Torah.
Thank you, Ariela, and thank you, Rabbi Goldberg, for an inspiring words. Your work is really melechet shamayim. Wishing you a much hatzlacha, Rabba, in what you do. It's a work that many of us are involved in, especially in this region. And I think if more of us will be involved in such work, we can definitely, I would say, bring Geula la'olam, bring a redemption to this world. So Chazak u'Baruch. Many a times in our lives, there are certain events that happened that they may not have much to do with each other, at least not on the surface of things, on the superficial things. So we go through certain events and we think each event is completely separate, distinct, nothing to do with another event. Yet sometimes there is an underlying common denominator in that. That's what we see in this week's parasha. This week's parasha, we see a lot of events that seem not to have a lot to do with each other. In a sense, they do have, because they're part of the historical, chronological events that took place, of course. So in a chronological way, there is definitely certain line of that one goes after the next. However, the underlying basis seem not to have much to do with each other. So we'll go with the first one, of course. The idea that the Torah mentions that the daughter of Pharaoh, known to us as Batya or Batya, and now known to the Egyptian archaeologists as Nefertiri or Nefertiti, she saves Moshe from the river and she adopts him as her own child. Then we have another event in which we see, before she saved him, of course, we see that Miriam, the sister of Moshe, as she placed him in the river, she waited to see what is going to happen to him. She did not just drop him and left, right? It says, "Vatetatzav achoto merachok lirot ma yikre lo." She stood from far just to see what is going to happen to him. And then when she saw that Batya picked him up, she felt much, much better. Then a third event that took place, it shows us how when Moshe arrived at Midian, and the daughters of Yitro told their fathers that this Egyptian man, he says, well, what are you doing? Call him so he could eat bread with us. Kir'en lo vayochal lachem. Well, you don't leave a guest outside in the street. Please invite him to come in and eat with us. And a fourth event that happened was when we saw how Moshe cared so much about his people, first of all, and then cared so much also about the sheep, that the Midrash tells us that he ran the sheep, that he carried the sheep because he felt the sheep was very, very tired. And he carried the sheep, and therefore the Midrash speaks greatly about Moshe. And the last event that I would like to speak about is that Aharon waited for Moshe with the gladness in his heart, as the Torah describes him, very, very happy to come. Now we could say that Aharon was the older brother. He was the kind of the leader of his family. And he is the one who was through Egypt, through the slavery, and he suffered it. And yet his brother Moshe was a prince, lived like a king. And then when the getting got rough, he basically ran away to Midian in a sense. And now he's coming back to be the leader of the Jewish people, and through him the redemption. So we might think that Aharon might have certain feelings of jealousy, certain feelings of resentment maybe, but the Torah clearly testifies that he was Vera'acha vesamach belibo, and he shall see you and he shall be very happy in his heart, which means deep happiness. So what is the common denominator amongst these five events, these five things? So certainly we see what people cared about other people. So the first one about Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, she called Moshe Moshe, Kimin hamayim meshitihu, because I drew him out of water. And apparently in ancient Egyptian terminology, Moses or Moses might mean have something to do with water. And so because of the chesed that she did, because of this act of benevolence that she did, that she raised him and took care of him, knowing full well that he was a Jew, he was a Hebrew, that the name that stuck with Moshe was Moshe. That was the most beloved name. Our sages tell us that God wanted to call Moshe because of that act of benevolence that Batya did. The Midrash tells us that Moshe had up to 10 names, different names, and yet Moshe was the name that he is known. He was known then, and he is known, and he will be always known forever, as Moses, as Musa, as Moshe. And that's because of the chesed of Batya. That's a testament to Batya's action of benevolence. The second one of Miriam, that she waited for her brother, we learn later on when Miriam passed away, the Torah tells us that the children of Israel waited 7 days for Miriam. I'm sorry, before she passed away, when she had the leprosy, they waited 7 days for her to cure herself of the leprosy so the whole camp could move. And that, again, the Midrash tells us, is a testament to her act of waiting for Moshe. She was deserving that all people of Israel wait 7 days and don't move as a respect for her. The third event of Moses carrying the sheep and caring for his people, the Midrash also tells us that God rewarded him to be the leader of Bnei Israel. He saw his acts of kindness, of mercy, how he cared for little animals, and he cared for his people, that God said, this will be the leader of my children. And he became the leader of Am Yisrael, given his acts of benevolence, mercy, and care. And the fourth one, that Yitro invited Moshe, not knowing who he was, an Egyptian man, his daughters told him, and knowing that Yitro, the Midrash tells us, had escaped Egypt also when he defended the Israelites with Pharaoh, and yet he welcomed him. He says, what better yichus can Yitro have that his own grandchildren were the children of Moshe, and in fact, that he was able to always live amongst the Israelites. And lastly, Aharon HaKohen, who gave up his firstborn rights, so to speak, who gladly ceded his power and his leadership to his younger brother, Moshe. He was given the task and the responsibility and the beautiful position of the high priest, the priesthood, that not only for him, but for the rest of his generations, forever and ever, to be known as the priest, the Kohanim of Am Yisrael. So we see from all these five events that the common denominator is what we do for the others. How we show care, when we care about other people, that those are rewarded, might be years later or decades later, but the reward, it will always be there. That our acts of benevolence, our acts of mercy and compassion and caring, they will always come back to us in a sense and give us the reward that is necessary. So let's hope and pray that we always keep that in mind when we have to take an extra minute to help somebody, when we have to make an extra effort to do something for someone, to help somebody, to in any way that our act will really benefit our fellow human being, then we certainly will be rewarded eventually on that. Shabbat Shalom and Nevarach.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Abadi. It's always nice going into Shabbat with the Dvar Torah from you. So thank you for joining us. And now over to Alex, who's going to read us from the Parsha this week.
ותרא האישה ותלד בן, ותרא אותו כי טובו, ותצפנהו 3 ירחים, ולא יכלה עוד הצפינו, ותיקח לו תיבת גומה, ותח מרבה חמח ובזפת, ותשם בה את הילד, ותשם בה סוף על שפת היאור, ותתצב אחותו מרחוק, לדיה מה יעשה לו, ותרד בת פרעה לחוץ על היאור, ונערותיה הולכות על יד היאור, ותראה את התיבה בתוך הסוף, ותשלח את המטה ותיקחיה, ותפתח ותראו את הילד והנה נער בוכה ותחמול עליו ותאמר מי ילדי העברים זה ותאמר אחותו אל בת פרעה הילך וקראתי לך אישה מנקת מן העבריות ותניק לך את הילד ותאמר לה בת פרעה לכי ותלך עלמה ותקרא את אם הילד ותאמר לה בת פרעה הילכי את הילד הזה וניקהו לי ואני אתן את שכרך ותיקח האישה הילד ותניקהו ויגדל הילד ותביאו לבת פרעה וילה לבן ותקרא שמו משה ותאמר כי מן המים משיתו. So I've been asked also to make a Mishaberach for the father of Eric Rubin who comes here on a regular basis on our Zoom, and I will add the name of my father also. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov Moshe veAharon David uShlomo. הוא יברך וירפא את החולים אבא בת רחל ואת יהושע בת שולמית בעבור שאנחנו ניתן מתנה בעבורם בשכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם להחלימם לרפאותם ולהחזיקם ולהחיותם וישלח להם מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים ולרמח איבריהם ושסה גידיהם בתוך שאר חולי ישראל רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב נאמר אמן.
That looks amazing.
Thank you so much, Alex. And now over to Cheryl for the English translation.
Hi everyone, Shabbat Shalom. A certain member of the house of Levi went and took a woman of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "This must be a Hebrew child." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses. Moshe from Egyptian for born of, here associated with Mashach, draw out, explaining, I drew him out of the water. Done.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And now we're going to go over to Jason for the prayer for peace.
Thank you, Ariella, and Shabbat Shalom. Prayer for peace, adapted from Rabbi Nachman ben Fega. Lord of peace, divine ruler, to whom peace belongs, master of peace, creator of all things, may it be your will to put an end to war and bloodshed on earth, and to spread a great and wonderful peace over the whole world. Help us and save us all, and let us cling tightly to the virtue of peace. Let there be a truly great peace between every person and their fellow, and let there be no discord between people, even in their hearts. Let us never shame any person on earth, great or small. May it be granted unto us to fulfill thy commandment, to love thy neighbor as thyself, with all our hearts and souls and bodies and possessions. God, who is peace, bless us with peace.
Thank you so much, Jason. And now we'll head over to Rick for the prayer for the GCC.
Thank you. This is the AGJC prayer for the welfare of the government of the GCC. May he who gives salvation to king and dominion to princes, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, who delivers his servant David from the evil sword, who makes a way in the sea and a path through the mighty waters, bless and protect, guard and help, exalt, magnify, and uplift His Majesty the King of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty the King of Bahrain, His Majesty the Sultan of Oman, His Highness the President of the UAE, His Highness the Emir of Kuwait, His Highness the Emir of Qatar, and all their crown princes. And may the Supreme King of Kings in His mercy put a spirit of wisdom and understanding into their hearts and the hearts of all their counselors and officials to deal kindly with us, the house of Jacob, and all the people of this land. Be their shelter and stronghold, and let them not falter. In their days and in ours, may these lands be blessed with stability, prosperity, and peace. May this be His will, and let us say Amen and Amen.
Thank you so much, Rick. And now back to Yoel for the Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharev, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharev, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem Malachi Asharet Malachi Elyon. Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Brochem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ruachem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ruachem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ruchuni Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitzchem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitzchem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitzchem Leshalom Malachi HaShalom Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malachi HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us this week. We hope you'll join us next week, same time, same place, and same Zoom link. Shabbat Shalom.
Goodbye.
Shabbat